Hey guys, what is going on? Chris here with Shughead Gaming, bringing you my review for Zone of the Enders, the second Runner Mars. Developed by Konami and released on the PS4 with full PSVR support September 4th for an estimated price of $35. Of course, that is depending on your region. Zone of the Enders, the second Runner Mars, is a third-person shooter hack-and-slash video game that was developed and published by Konami for the PlayStation 2 back in 2003, then remastered and released again in late 2012 for the PS3 and the Xbox 360. And here we see it again, remastered for the PS4, but this time with remastered sound, bringing in full surround sound implementation and of course, full VR support. The sequel to Zone of the Enders is based around mecha combat, with the player once again controlling the orbital frame, Jehudi. This classic title, produced by Hideo Kojima, mastermind of the famed Metal Gear Solid series and up-and-coming Death Stranding, has stood the test of time, but does it benefit from the VR upgrade? Let's find out. As always guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button, and if you want to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing, and for updates, hit that bell icon. As always, graphics are up first. Zoe, yep, I'm calling it Zoe from here on in, it's a long title, is not a reimagined game but simply a remaster, bumping up the resolution and frame rate based off the original game assets. As such, the graphics here are simple, ultra clean, and extremely reminiscent of the PS2 era Metal Gear Solid, but of course ultra sharp. The conversion to PSVR has been seamless, with visuals still coming across very sharp, free of jagged edges, and a buttery smooth frame rate. The big addition here for VR is the Cockpit View. This view has you at the controls of Jehudi, with your complete body being visible as you look around the cockpit. The cockpit visuals are sharp, yet still skew to the simpler side so as to still feel part of the game world while offering a very cool cockpit to be inside. A very appreciated feature was the ability to fully adjust the seating position in the cockpit. This ensured everything felt right and I had the best and least obstructed view for the fast and frenetic action ahead. The play areas in Zoe can range from concrete and metallic structures to various outside environments. Most areas tend to be fairly large with a good sense of verticality. These play well in VR, but unfortunately they are extremely bland looking, with repeated textures everywhere and a real lack of anything to make them memorable. Zoe really shows its PS2 roots here, but you will often be flying and dashing so much that you may not care too much. The big thing here, as I mentioned previously, with a game that's moving this fast is frame rate, and the simpler textures of an older game work well here in VR, as evidenced by the ultra smooth frame rates on display. Mech models as well as character and ship designs are unsurprisingly awesome in their stylized anime look, coming from the mind of famed artist Yoji Shinkawa, who previously worked on the Metal Gear Solid series. These designs definitely stand the test of time despite the simpler graphics, and it's a joy to be able to view them in their true-to-life scale in VR. Cutscenes flip between the in-game engine and anime-styled drawn animation, with the drawn animation having aged better and as such being the preferred choice. Luckily, the majority of the narrative is told through this style, with the in-game engine often handling the quick-time event-style scenes. Zoe is narrative heavy, so be prepared to sit through hours of animated cutscenes. Fortunately, they too seem to have been remastered, so sitting through these doesn't hurt the eyes while viewing them on the theater-sized flat screen in front of you. All in all, a great remaster that also visually made a great PSVR port. Just don't expect to see upgraded textures, lighting, or particle effects. And that brings us to sound.
Confirming the enemy destroyed.
What is the efficiency of this frame?
This is orbital frame Jehudi. Do you want me to explain how to manipulate the frame?
Who is this?
This is Detached Backup Battle Unit, ADA.
So this is a battle computer, isn't it? More reliable than the Lev's navigators.
As I mentioned earlier, Zone of the Enders, the second Runner Mars, has received the remaster treatment in the audio department as well. As far as I'm aware, this is the same soundtrack, voice work, and sound effects as seen on previous releases, but here on this re-release, the game has been given an upgrade in the form of a true surround sound mix. As a result, the mix sounds full, with some nicer rear sound placement allowing for better placement of incoming fire. It's unfortunate that us VR users aren't getting a 3D audio mix, but hey, I'm just thrilled Konami thought of us at all. As for the previous sound effects, they are adequate if not particularly inspiring. They sound like laser blasts and explosions that you would expect to hear from 90s anime, with menu prompts sounding unsurprisingly like they were ripped out of a Metal Gear menu. The Zoe series has long been bashed for its craptastic voice dubbing. As such, I went into Zoe fearing the worst, but I honestly didn't hate it. True, it may be a bit hit or miss, but it didn't make my ears bleed and kept me interested throughout the cinematics. It's the music here that is easily the highlight of the sound mix. Having been previously released on album back in 2003, the soundtrack has won many accolades, and I'm pleased to report it has still aged quite well here in 2018. Never too loud in the mix, the music here is definitely video gamey, but well used to add urgency to action scenes and weight to more epic moments. As with most Kojima games, the narrative is epic, and you need epic music to complement that. Zone of the Enders, the second Runner Mars, is no exception and completes this well put together sound package. And that brings us to gameplay. Zoe at its core is an arcade shooter. Yes, it has deep narrative and some slightly deeper game mechanics, but when you're not watching a cinematic, you're doing one of a handful of gaming mechanics. You are in command of the orbital frame Jehudi, which for those unfamiliar with the lore is basically a nimble flying mech. After a quick and helpful tutorial, you are thrust into action. Here, over the next 5 hours of actual gameplay, you will be dashing and shooting and slicing your way through an almost endless assortment of enemies. Gameplay does get deeper by adding verticality, attack combos, blocking, and charge attacks, but make no mistake, Zoe is an arcade shooter, and while fun for a while, I did find with the limited enemy variety and lack of upgradable weapons, things got stale after about the 3-hour mark. Yes, there are the tried and true objectives like escort this mech and destroy these depots, but these are still largely just excuses for more shooting. If you enjoy boss fights, you may find more joy in the repetitive gameplay, but for me, these fights with their increased difficulty just came off as more of the same, but now more difficult and sometimes irritatingly so. Gameplay is fast, with much of it involving you circling locked targets, firing off range attacks, then darting quickly in for close attacks. The action here is definitely frenetic and intense, which is made all the more so with the jump to VR. Even with a multitude of comfort options, people with VR sickness should likely proceed with caution, as the jump to VR has made Zoe a drastically more intense experience, with jumping from close attack to close attack particularly disorienting, but awesome for those with the stomachs for it. I love VR games that give us the options to completely take off the training wheels, and Konami should be applauded for doing so. Maybe the biggest question from fans of the series will be how this newly added first-person view in VR plays in the game world they grew up with playing in the third person. With me personally being a Zone of the Enders virgin, I can't really comment on the differences, but I can say that Konami has done a great job of not letting the cockpit get in your way. Throughout my playthrough, not once did I ever feel restricted or clumsy, as the large windshield and the game's tendency to always be locked on to targets and objectives made combat smooth and easy. Game length comes in around the 7-hour mark, with approximately 2 hours of that being cinematics. Replayability will honestly be up to the gamer and how much you enjoy the pure arcade action. For those wanting more, the game has difficulty levels, and additional levels can be found and picked up throughout your playthroughs. Zoe is played with the DualShock 4 and will be played seated with minimum space required. And that brings us to fun factor and my final review. Zone of the Enders, the second Runner Mars, is a fun blast from the past with a fantastic and while surprising, albeit welcomed PSVR support. For me, Zoe got a bit stale with its arcade-style shoot, rinse, repeat gameplay. That being said, this is a better, more intense game in VR, and for those who love these types of shooters, and especially the crazy storytelling of one Hideo Kojima, you will likely love this. As you know, I rate games on a basis of buy, wait for a sale, or burn it to the ground. Zoe is a 15-year-old PS2 classic with 2 prior releases. As such, many of you have likely played this already or have decided to pass on it as it wasn't your thing. That being said, VR does have a tendency to make games we would never usually play awesome, and this game is a prime candidate. That being said, at close to $40, it's not a cheap gamble, so unless you're a longtime fan of the series stoked to hear it's good so you can jump in it in VR, I would suggest waiting for a sale to try this PS2 classic out in VR. As always, guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button, and if you want to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing, and for updates, hit that bell icon. That's it for me, guys. I will catch you on my next video.